Welcome back, everybody, to the second half hour of News Talk for this Thursday. So grateful to have you with us this time. Reporter Josie Sturman is on deck. She's next for us. She has a preview of a fascinating consumer story in the medical area that she's working on right now for ABC 7 News at 11 p.m. Stick around for that. Right now, though, let's get back to our conversation with and your phone calls for D.C. Attorney General Karl Racine. Betsy, stand by. We'll be going to the phones in a moment. When we do, you're first. Please remain on the line. Television there in the room muted because, Betsy, you'll be talking with Attorney General Karl Racine in the moments that follow, with phone lines open at 703-387-1020 for those of you watching live in the 11 a.m. hour. Mr. Attorney General, can you talk with us about the case involving the teenagers on the platform at the Gallery Place metro station back in January who were initially charged with a crime after a video, closed-circuit metro video of their attack on a 35-year-old man surfaced. Charges later dropped. I'm sure there are people in the public who would be concerned or have questions about the process leading to the decision. Can you talk about that?
Sure, and I appreciate the question and certainly understand the public's concern whenever they hear about aggressive behavior, particularly in a metro, and that a case later has been dropped. I can't talk specifically about the case at issue. There are confidentiality laws that prevent me from doing that. Here's what I can say, though. What I can tell you is that whenever we have a case presented to us for prosecution, we thoroughly look at the case, investigate the case, and make a determination as to whether the legal threshold for a charge, probable cause, has been established, and whether we might, in a court of law, prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. Oftentimes in cases that are reported, sadly, the identification of the suspects is lacking. Indeed, we have facts sometimes that others do not. And so you can expect that when a case gets dismissed by the Office of Attorney General, it's done so with great reluctance only because of insufficiency of evidence.
A group was arrested at Woodley, about 6 stops from Gallery Place, by Metro Police a short time after this incident. Is there an issue about whether that group was the first group? Whether these were the kids who punched? I mean, a witness who I saw on the news said she said the group was 10. I guess charges were filed against 6, 5 boys and a girl. The witness said it was 10 people who stomped the man, the 35-year-old man.
And I don't doubt.
And there was the reference to it being the phrase that generated some pushback from DCPS was that this was a wolf pack mentality exhibited by the teens.
Look, any type of group aggressive activity on innocent victims is terrible, should be investigated, and where the evidence establishes responsibility on the part of individuals should be prosecuted. Again, I cannot talk specifically about these particular cases, but let me give you an example of a case very similar, where in fact the individual who was deemed to be the offender turned out to be a person who had physical evidence. In this particular case that I'm not talking about specifically, the person had a fare card that indicated that they were not in the station where the assault occurred. So these questions of identification, the validity of the identification, the persuasiveness of the evidence are issues that police and prosecutors have to really thoroughly review before we bring a case. The worst thing we can do is bring a case that has insufficient evidence and get into a situation where we're prosecuting someone who may not have been the culprit.
Because you could tarnish the good reputation of an innocent young person.
We have to be accurate, and we have to have sound evidence to move on a prosecution.
To the phones, Betsy on line 1. Hello. Thank you for your patience, and thank you, of course, for watching. Go right ahead with your comment or question, please.
Okay, I live in Northern Virginia, but I'm very much in favor of full voting rights and all that for the district. I was wondering, first of all, beyond contacting my own representatives, what I might do, and secondly, maybe you guys need some kind of a publicity campaign for the rest of the country to inform people about just how disenfranchised D.C. is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Betsy. So in terms of recruiting and energizing allies and the broader push to make the district's plight known to the nation.
I think it's exceedingly important. And Betsy, thank you so much for your call and your comments. When people understand the unfairness that confronts the District of Columbia by virtue of our not being able to have representation in Congress, they are oftentimes surprised. But once they learn about it, they become advocates for full representation and indeed statehood. Part of the effort that the Statehood Commission, led by Mayor Bowser and Chairman Mendelson, are focusing on is really elevating the awareness, not only in the District of Columbia, but beyond the District of Columbia. My responsibility as Attorney General will be to make contact with all of the Attorney Generals in the other states, raise awareness, and try to get as much support as I can from my colleagues in other states.
I understand the long tradition and the inclination of judges and justices at the High Court to leave politics to the political realm. By the same token, though, when there is a wrong that legislators at any level won't address and fix, the framers gave us a system where there's another door you can knock on, right? And the judges can say, I'm going to fix something that these people either don't see or see and refuse not to deal with. So the question is, how, given that no nation, there's been research on this, I believe the number is 172 nations looked at, no nation except this one treats the residents of its capital the way this country treats the residents of D.C., how is it not a slam dunk to go to the Supreme Court? I'm oversimplifying, I know life is never this simple, but it's so clear.
You know,
how do you not go to the Supreme Court and prevail 9-0?
There is no doubt about it that in terms of basic fairness, it's so clear that the District of Columbia should have full representation and should in fact be a state. The problem is that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the United States Constitution created the District of Columbia as the national seat of government and gave to Congress ultimate authority over the District of Columbia. Now, we have been gaining more power over time, right? Elected mayor, elected council, recently now an elected attorney general. But we still have that constitutional impediment. That's why at the end of the day, we can come up with creative legal solutions, and we should continue to try to do that. But I think at the end of the day, we need to go right to Congress, press the case with overwhelming support, and be admitted properly as a state of the Union.
How optimistic are you?
I'm very optimistic at the passion and energy and commitment and solidarity of elected officials and advocates. And I think that in the next several months and indeed the coming years, you're going to see that ferocity really advance the ball in a way that perhaps the ball hasn't been advanced in years past.
Let's bring it back to the hyperlocal. In terms of the initiatives you would like your office to be able to pursue in an earnest fashion, what sort of budgetary goals do you have as the mayor proposes and the council deliberates upon a budget for fiscal 2017?
Sure. Very briefly, what we'd like to do is focus on a couple of areas. Number one, we want to continue to focus on juvenile justice reform. What that's all about is intervening early in the lives of young people, delivering services that they need to buttress themselves, because frankly, in areas in the District of Columbia, there are too many kids who are raising each other without consistent, reliable adults. We need to spend money and resources on getting the services to those kids. And where we do that, there is no doubt about it. There's less criminal conduct, there's more perfect attendance in school.
Clear payoff.
And a clear payoff. So we're asking for money to allow the Office of Attorney General to partner with the Department of Human Services and deliver great services to kids. In addition, we're seeking additional money for the council to protect elderly seniors who are oftentimes the victim of financial crime and indeed physical and mental abuse. So we've asked the council and the mayor to provide us just 4 additional FTEs, 2 lawyers and 2 investigators, so we can go do a better job of protecting seniors. Lastly, we're asking the council to provide us with additional lawyers, 2 investigators again, to focus on wage theft. There's a problem in the District of Columbia and other jurisdictions where unscrupulous bosses are taking advantage of vulnerable employees. We would like to be far more active in making sure that those unscrupulous bosses are held to account.
Does this, we have like no seconds left, does this relate at all to the trend, maybe too strong a word, but the notion of I'll call you at the last minute if I need you kind of scheduling, and rather than saying, Joe, I need you Monday from 2 to 6 and Wednesday from 4 to 9, I'll call you at the last minute if I need you, so the employee is always hanging and potentially has no work and no pay?
That's so-called on-call scheduling, and we think that's wrong. In fact, the Office of Attorney General recently sent a letter out to a bunch of retailers asking them to stop that practice. That is a variant of wage theft. Wage theft is a broad category.
Did your letter help?
I believe that our letter has gotten the attention of the retailers. In fact, some retailers have determined that they're no longer going to proceed on on-call scheduling.
D.C. Attorney General Karl Racine, a regular guest here on the program. Always great having you here. We'll look to continue the conversation next month.
Great to see you, Bruce.
Thanks very much for your time. Good to see you, as always. We'll step aside here. I-Team investigator Josie Sturman is next. You don't want to miss our conversation with her. Keep it here.